Hello and welcome to How to Play Air. This is not a basic guide on the controls of Air, this is specifically about top tier. Primarily, what I'm going to go over is how to get your missiles the best chance at hitting their target, how to choose targets, and how to avoid missiles at a couple different ranges. This should help increase your survivability and allow you to hit back harder against your opponents. The first thing, as with most game modes, is to look at your key bindings. In aircraft, you already will have things like pitch, roll, and throttle, probably on whatever you want. But the things that I want to highlight are, specifically on radar, knowing how to switch radar IRST beyond and within visual range combat. This is going to be the button you use to switch into ACM mode and HMS mode. That stands for Air Combat Maneuvers, which is the radar mode that just goes directly in front of your plane, and HMS for Helmet Mounted System, which is how you are going to lock targets with that area that moves around when you free look. On top of that, you're going to want to know how to change your mode. This is going to help you switch between a variety of radar modes and find the one that is going to be the best for long-range combat, which on most aircraft in this game is TWS or Track While Scan. You're also going to need to know how to switch to Scope Scale. This is going to change how far out your radar is looking, and Search Mode, which is going to change your radius. At this point, I would also look at countermeasures. While if you've got to this point in the air tree, you probably already have firing countermeasures and potentially even periodic countermeasure release and countermeasure slaving to mob bound, I would also bind something to switching countermeasures, as when you're high up in the air and primarily defending against radar missiles, you might not want to be wasting your flares, which you may have to dump in the event that you need to dodge an R-73 or Magic 2 when you're in the furball. That being said, when you are up in the air, it is often useful to pop a couple flares just in case a Russian plane has fired an R-27ET at you. Okay, on the airfield, the first thing you want to do, usually as you're starting your engines, but I'm going to take a second here, is switch your radar to the TWS mode. As you can see, my radar has a bunch of different versions. I'm going to TWS, or Track While Scan, because it's going to offer you the best example of how to see every enemy. The next thing you want to do is set it to the largest scope scale you have available. For me, that is 60 degrees by 5 degrees. And finally, you want to make sure that your range is at least over 50 kilometers, as you want to be taking most of your long-range shots at about 30 to max 35 kilometers. Once I've set that, I'm going to get airborne. This is an example of a bad target. As you can see over here, the little line which indicates his direction is almost perpendicular to me. So it's going to be very easy for him to get into a notch angle. He's also a bit too far away at only about 40 kilometers, where we really want less than that. And I'm not going particularly fast, nor am I above him. Here you'll see that if I fire a missile at him, he's going to have relatively low difficulty notching it. This is an example of a relatively good target. I have an altitude advantage on him, I'm going pretty fast, and as you can see, he's pointing towards me instead of away. This is a target you should shoot at. Once it gets to about 30 kilometers, I'm going to take the shot, and you'll see here, the missile has a much easier time tracking my opponent. Now, in your real games, sometimes people will simply turn away from your missile. However, generally, a target that is going straight when you see it on the radar in this first contact part, where both teams are about 30 kilometers away, is much less likely to turn away than a target that is already at an angle, and you're more likely to score a hit. Now, you can see that I'm up here. I'm going to switch to chaff by clicking the button that switches my countermeasures, and I'm going to begin pulling out. In this example, let's say I have no missiles or something. It's not the case, but we're pretending. When the enemy takes a shot at me, I'm going to immediately begin turning out. How you notch these missiles is to place it exactly at the side. As you can see, I have a radar cross in the center of my RWR. I'm going to place the missile exactly at my side, go slightly upward, and dump chaff. Now, at this distance, dumping chaff is not spamming the button, it's kind of leisurely pressing it every once in a while. You can see, by pulling this maneuver, the missile is going to go behind me relatively harmlessly. Once I see the missile has begun pulling off, I can then turn in to re-engage my target. This is the basics of how you should be engaging in top tier air at a distance. If you are playing this kind of far out engagement, what you're going to be wanting to do is fire your missiles only at targets that you can reasonably expect to get a hit on. If you're firing on bad targets, you can't then be surprised when you don't get hits. Even with 8 AMRAMs, you can pretty easily miss a good few of those if you're firing on targets that have already begun to take defensive maneuvers and can easily simply chaff away. In this example, let's look at close range dodging. Let's say I'm relatively close to my target here, and he is in front of me. Well, oftentimes, this can be very difficult for people to dodge. The second my target takes the shot, I'm going to want to immediately begin pulling away and dumping chaff. At a short range here, it's very important to get perpendicular to the missile as fast as possible and begin chaffing to ensure it misses. Let's look at that at an even closer range. Now, I can see the target is below me and on my right. You want to pull to the shortest angle possible, meaning if the target's on my right, I want to be pulling to my right. So here, I'm going to dump chaff and simply turn to the right. I'm going to follow this through, and the missile is going to go behind me. That's the real trick here. You want to be pulling to the shortest angle possible where you are perpendicular to the missile. That means whatever direction you're going, the missile is going the opposite direction as an angle, a 90-degree angle to you. Once again, you can see target is locking me up. He is firing the missile. Here, I'm going to pull towards the missile and pop chaff, and you can see it passes relatively harmlessly behind me. Here, I can now set up for my own shot, and this is going to be a little risky to try and take with an AMRAM, as their pull is not incredible at close range immediately off the rail. But that's another thing at top tier air. Sometimes you're going to miss, and then you ready yourself up and you take another shot. Very big thing at top tier air. Do not be worried about wasting a missile. You have 8 of them. If you get 4 kills with 8 missiles, you're already doing incredible. You have the largest possible RP skill bonus, right? If you are firing all 8 of your missiles way too early, or you're simply holding them because you're worried that they might miss, you're going to lose more matches, and you're going to get less kills. Sometimes you fire a missile when you don't even expect to get a kill. You simply fire it to force your opponent to maneuver, and then they're in a better position for your next shot. Top tier air has a lot of nuances, and a lot of the advice that I've said today isn't necessarily going to apply the same in every single situation. But by understanding the basics of how you dodge missiles both at long and short range, you can get a lot better at surviving matches and therefore getting more kills. My number one piece of advice today is not how to notch at long range. It is not how to get those very good short-range notches that I just showed off. My number one piece of advice is that when you first see targets on your radar, fight the urge to fire all of your AMRAMs at 45 kilometers out and on targets that are going at a bad angle in the hopes that you get 1 to 2 kills. Instead, fire them on targets that are at that perfect 30-kilometer sweet spot and going towards you, and wait. Let the other guys go past you. Keep a couple AMRAMs for when the teams have merged and you're able to get shots on less suspecting targets at a closer range where they're going to have a much higher chance of failing to dodge your missile. That being said, this has been the basics of how to play top tier air, how to dodge missiles, how to choose your missile shots, and how to get a better KD in your average matches. I hope you've learned something from this, and if you haven't, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments that I suck at the game. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.